There are more towards the front. I'll see if there's a spare one.
This evening is Simon Whipple. Simon is a member of our committee and in charge of our
There is one there, and there's also one on the table.
Subsistence with me. He's also a very highly paid. He's also become a very highly paid employee of the BBC, and he's earning far more than the Prime Minister. So will you please give a big welcome to Simon Whipple.
The year is 2022. The Prime Minister has recently been forced to resign because we're not satisfied with him. We are in a parallel universe where everything is the same as the universe we're used to, except that the majority party in the House of Commons is the Humanist Party. Now, as you well know, the Humanist Party customs when appointing a new leader is initially for the 1984 committee to arrange for ballots to reduce the numbers to 2, after which the remaining 2 candidates are put to the general electorate, the membership of the party. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, a very considerable responsibility rests upon the 30-odd faces I see in front of me to choose the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I trust you will do this with due gravitas. There are 4 candidates to be leader of the Humanist Party, of which one of them will become the Prime Minister. To introduce the candidates, we have, in no particular order, Cathy Silman, Daniel Dancy, David Warden.
Don't forget the knighthood.
I'm sorry?
Please don't forget the knighthood.
There are questions we will have to ask the...
He bought it. He bought it.
I'm sorry, we can't have barracking from the audience at this stage. However, I think we do note he hasn't bothered to stand up, whereas the others... And finally, Aaron Dartwood, who applauds himself.
Just to be sure I get one.
There will be 3 ballots during this evening. At each ballot, the number will be reduced by 1. As you know, I am your compere for the evening. The other persona to be introduced are the joint chairs of the 1984 committee, Dame George Asquith and Sir Stephen Neal. These ballots will, of course, be secret ballots. No need to you and your and the results. No need to you and your constituents. Steve and George will distribute voting slips at the to each elector and collect them in when you voted. You will all need some means of marking your ballot, unless you merely wish to waste it. They will then count them and make an announcement stating the numbers of votes cast, and following the result of which the losing candidate will leave the podium. We are staying open till 9:30, so we've got a lot of business to get through. There will be a break after the first ballot when you can adjourn to the Commons tea room. Drinks have already been ordered for you, and you can collect your drink as you leave, and we are keeping to strict time because there is only 20 minutes to return before the next stage of the hustings. While you are in the Commons tea room, I'll be grateful if those who have questions to ask could write them down together with the name of the person to whom they wish the question to be addressed and their own name, and hand them in. Because of the nature of time, it will, and because I will be facing away from you, it won't be possible to take questions by a show of hands. I will select those questions who are going to give the best TV. I'll randomly choose which questions we be put to the candidates. Now, I should say that although this is clearly a matter of choosing the best candidate with the best policies to be the best Prime Minister, there are certain levels of questioning to which we will not sink. Now, no one among these four candidates will acquire a fictitious history upon which allegations or spurious questions can be asked. Equally, during the period in the tea room, they may approach you with small offers. Clearly, they may or may not succeed in obtaining your vote, but no questions will be asked about such nefarious practices. Well, that's quite enough of preamble. Beyond the fact that there is a certain amount of discipline required among all these four cats, that noise says, "Shut up." This noise, when my kitchen timer reaches the end of their allotted time, the speaker must stop mid-sentence, mid-word. We have already drawn lots as to who will speak first, and Cathy Tillman is the first to speak. She will be granted 7 minutes to set out her policies, followed by Dan, David, then Aaron. So Cathy, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Elect me as your new Prime Minister so together we can forge a society based on humanist principles of fairness, reason and the pursuit of happiness for nearly all, not on power and avarice. Now more than ever, we need an emperor's new clothes moment when everyone remains true to their humanist principles and is willing to examine our economy and society through a different lens. Looking at money, the government is not dependent on revenue from taxes or borrowing to finance its spending. Our government, as a sovereign monetary power, can create its money. The amount it can create is only limited by inflation and access to its resources, natural, human and intellectual. It can and is running out of those, especially natural. We do not need to pay off the national debt. Indeed, to do so, when Clinton tried it in America, it led to a very large recession. I'd like to reconsider why we measure our progress by GDP. By this measure, we are the 6th largest economy in the world. I'm sure at least 60% of our nation do not see this in their ever decreasing spending power. The welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measure of national income. Kuznets said that in 1960. He was the person who coined the term in 1930. Kay Rayworth made this model to illustrate the need for our economy to provide a safe place to live in for all its population. Move too far out and we damage the environment, biodiversity, climate change. Move too far in and too many of our people in our population fall through the hole and no longer have enough water, food, income, health to survive. Compare the prosperities of countries by how many of its population it keeps out of that hole and how little damage it does to the environment. I now like to look at land and how we use it. Henry George, an economist in 1870, said, "Land is the only thing that gains in value with no effort, no tax." Winston Churchill, which surprised me, said he contributes nothing to the excess from the process from which its own enrichment is derived. I'd like you to look at this graph. On the graph is the graph of the money invested by banks, not just the Bank of England, commercial banks, into different areas. The brown is the financial services, the green is every other type of business, the red is consumer spending, and the yellow is housing. Capital since the 2007-8 crash has largely been allocated to housing, not to productive business. It didn't drip down. This use of housing as an asset, rather than just a home, is increasing the difficulty of a very large number of lower paid and young people to live above the poverty line. Changing underlying views takes time. We are in an emergency now, as you all know. To address this, I will immediately introduce the following legislation. Other legislation, hopefully drafted in conjunction with advice from citizens' assemblies, will follow. Dan, could you move to the left a bit? Raise universal credit by at least £30 a week. Forbid all house building except council houses for the next 3 years. Aim to build at least 300,000 council houses a year. I think we might have to bribe the developers. Repeal Planning Act, preventing the council from using compulsory purchase orders to acquire land at the current value. Introduce rent freezes, but tax incentives for landlords who charge an affordable rent. Introduce land value tax on all overseas property development investments. Most landlords and second home owners, and this one I'm sure will be popular, owner-occupiers of houses worth more than the average for the area. Ban most sales to non-owner occupiers on. Immediately introduce extremely low affordable rate for a small amount of gas and electricity, sufficient for the health of a family of 4 in a 2-bed flat. Then the market rate. Nationalise the utility companies and to add to these a combination of research and construction of more tidal, solar and hydrogen production fuels. Compulsory installation standards for all homes, new and old. If owner occupied and worth less than the average for the area, then this will be government funded. For the NHS, immediately set up Nightingale-type social care homes run by the NHS by each hospital to free up beds. Fund properly paid care assistants. As soon as possible, actually merge social care and the NHS. Then free training, childcare and bursaries to re-qualify experienced healthcare assistants as nurses, and for nurses to train as doctors. I know they've been trained as nurse practitioners now. Remember, we are electing the leader of a Humanist Party. A party, I hope you agree with me, truly believes the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice and peace in the world. Sen, the Indian economist, we need to forge a cycle of advancing the richness of human life rather than the richness of our economy in which humans live. And these are some of the authors of books I consulted on this, and I'm going to invite them all to join my Treasury team as my economic advisors when I'm elected. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I respect your vote. Just switch off.
Well, thank you, Kathy. I think because Kathy is finished very slightly early, we'll give David a chance to ask any questions of Kathy.
Can I just say, if I've got 1 second to use up, can I actually say, by the way, I'm actually 55. If David could be a sir, I'm 55. So don't see me as someone too old.
I thought you were 40.
No. I want to be realistic. I have integrity and honesty.
Time's up now.
Do I still have the opportunity to ask
You
one
do,
question?
yes. The ping hasn't gone yet.
Kathy, I very much liked a lot of the...
Carry on.
Kathy, I very much liked a lot of the content of your speech there. But I was a little bit worried by the final quotation from Amartya Sen. Almost sounds as though you're kind of anti the economy. There was a lot about redistribution and helping the poor, and all of that is great. But I just wondered how you're going to actually, stimulate the economy. It sounded as though you kind of didn't believe in it in the end.
Of course I believe in the economy. If you mean by the economy, the wealth of the country that serves everybody, that means we can all go to work, we can all have a job, we can all have a living, or how the money goes round in society. Definitely that. The richness of an economy is the people. It's not just the money, it's their health. It's no good having a very wealthy, small amount of people at the top of the economy and a very large amount of people who aren't paid well and aren't healthy. They then are a big draw on the NHS. They are unable to train.
I think we'll have to cut you short there, Kathy.
Okay.
That was very interesting, but we are running short on time. Daniel, now it's your turn for 7 minutes, starting now.
Sorry.
Hello. You might be surprised to hear me start my speech by saying that I don't want to be Prime Minister. I don't want to be Prime Minister in the sense, well, not just that it's a lot of hard work, although, well, it probably would be. But I also don't that much enjoy the idea of being in the public eye, and I don't have any desire to experience the thrill of command and being the guy that's in charge that everyone looks up to. But I do recognise that the job needs to be done, and I think it should be done with a degree of honour and duty and honesty, and with an eye to improving the human well-being in this country.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough recently to be able to go to a dentist, something that isn't available for a lot of people nowadays. A lot of people who are living in poverty can't afford to go to the dentist privately, and NHS is no longer really available for everybody. And that means that their health suffers in many, many ways, because if your dental health is bad, that kind of has knock-on effects to other things. And, if your teeth are bad, it contributes to your overall appearance and makes it harder to get jobs and things. And generally, being in poverty is noticeable. There is a social stigma associated with being in poverty. You know a poor person when you see one, and it is harder to get a job. And I don't think there's any need to have a large number of people in this country living in poverty. But you'll be able to read about that in my letter thing and my policy document. Regarding my policy document, I'd like to give a quick quote from George Orwell, 1984, where he says that the best books are those which tell you what you already believe.
Yes.
And I hope that my policy proposals remind you of that quote, but that's the only thing about my leadership that will remind you of George Orwell books. I have several friends and colleagues who work as software engineers, as contractors for the civil service and for the government. And I've heard many stories that basically say that the whole process is extremely inefficient. The government tends to put out contracts for work to be done that a private company will come along and do, and they'll do all the planning at the beginning, and then they'll try and do the project, but by the time it's done, the needs have changed and the project fails, and it's just a complete disaster. But at least there's lots of paperwork showing why it failed and why it's not the minister's fault. There's also a web page on the internet from the civil service talking about how they use technology to make the government more efficient, and it basically boils down to they've recently discovered how to use Skype. I'm not very impressed by that, so what I would like to do is I would like to hire people from leading software engineering companies and just companies in general who have real expertise in the management of large organisations, which our country is, so that we can have an in-house team of support staff helping the civil service to provide help to the MPs. I think it will make government go by a lot more smoothly. One of my plans would be that they would develop a database which would store all of the proposed policies for our country. There would be analysis done to figure out what the results might be, or what they're predicted to be, in a quantitative way for a variety of policy areas. For instance, for a policy to increase cycling, how will it affect road deaths, heart attacks because of the increase in health, carbon emissions, etc. Then filter that through a model describing the minister's agendas and end up with a list of prioritised policies that are ordered in terms of priority and the size of the job. Because that's what I do in my work. I have a list of priorities and some software that tells me what to do and when, and it's really efficient, but they just don't have that in government because they're, decades behind companies. I definitely think we need a technological revolution in this country. I think that goods transports could be automated. I think a lot of things about government could be automated and improved. Computer systems could be upgraded. I think it would be reasonable for us to have something like Amazon, but provided by the government, or at least based in the UK, so that when you buy something, you're not guaranteed to have a percentage of the sale going off to some big American company. And I have some other policies, like housing. I very much agree with Kathy on many things in relating to housing. I think cheap housing will very much improve people's quality of life in the UK. I think a lot of people are not able to get on with life simply because they can't complete the first step of having somewhere to live. And so in my policy document I've said that I'm comfortable with house prices going down dramatically. And I know I've just lost the vote of everybody who owns more than one house, but that's fine.
Me.
I also have policies on workers' rights and public transport and drugs and other humanist issues, but I think that the actual policies are less important than the importance of MPs and the Prime Minister understanding that the role is bigger than themselves and that their ego and reputation is not as important as the role that they occupy. If I make a mistake, or if I'm wrong, or if I don't know the answer to a question, I will have to admit that to you. And I hope that you will get rid of me if you ever find that I have done otherwise. You could assassinate me, or who knows, or just vote me out, please. One final point, because I did mention in my policy proposal, towards the end, under the section of war and nuclear weapons, I mentioned that I would not launch a nuclear weapon under any circumstances, even if it was our only tool to stop an advancing army from invading the UK and enslaving us all. I know that's not a very good thing for a Prime Minister to say, but the reason for that is that as a humanist, I think that we should represent the interests of all humans. And a nuclear war would kill all humans on Earth. That if British people want to kill themselves in a nuclear war, they're very welcome to kill themselves in the comfort of their own homes. But I won't be doing it for them. Thank you.
You got my vote.
Well, thank you, Dan. That's a very interesting statement. I now call on Aaron just to ask any questions of you.
It is very noble of Dan not to want to defend this country with a nuclear defence, and the deterrent being in the word deterrent, because I think Ukraine, who gave up their nuclear weapons and are the only person to be invaded as a result of it, I think would be very much happy to have the deterrent there so that Russia didn't cross their borders. What would you say to Ukraine right now?
Yes, well, there have been wars all throughout history. I don't mean that war is acceptable. I think that our number one priority, after not having a nuclear war around the world that kills absolutely everybody, is not having any war.
And Ukraine having nuclear weapons has prevented the war until they crossed the border.
Well, it might have done, but there is a possibility, maybe not in the next decade, but maybe in the next 100 years or 1,000 years, that some madman, and we have had a couple of recent examples of madmen in control of nuclear weapons, might decide that it is worthwhile to launch one, either to pursue an aim of their country, or just because they're so angry.
I think we'll leave it. We'll leave it on your suggesting that people in charge of nuclear weapons may be mad.
They might be mad.
Yes.
Or selfish.
We really do need to move on. I'm sure you appreciate that. I don't want the audience to get bored waiting. So it is now time for David Warden to give us his... Sir David.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you this evening at Dorset Humanists. One of your members recently wrote on Facebook that the UK is a failed state. I do not believe that this is the case. The United Kingdom is a wealthy economy with a vibrant culture and dynamic people. But in many respects, our country has been badly governed for a generation. We need a new political philosophy and a new Prime Minister to tackle the many crises we face. The world is changing rapidly and we face many new threats and challenges. We are indirectly at war with Vladimir Putin, and as Emmanuel Macron has rightly stated, we are called upon to make sacrifices in defence of freedom. And Boris Johnson today said in Ukraine that the people of Ukraine are paying in blood. The pain which people are feeling here when they go to buy food or try to pay their bills is in part the price which we are paying for freedom from tyranny. It's the task of our generation, with our friends in Germany, France, the United States, Poland and many other countries, to assist the people of Ukraine in their struggle. We must not fail in this task, because if we do fail, then many more countries across Europe are at risk. The UK faces many domestic problems: rampant inflation, unaffordable energy bills, lack of housing, the NHS crisis, train strikes, bin strikes, and even barristers are going on strike for a decent wage. Many of these problems are interlinked. We can't tackle these crises with old ideologies and old solutions. We need a government which is soundly based on humanist principles. We need to regain a sense of politics for the common good, as outlined by your economist Henry Ruff in his talk to you earlier this year. The UK is a living community. It's not something to be carved up and sold off to the highest bidder. You wouldn't sell off your wife or your husband to the highest bidder. Or maybe you would. You wouldn't tuck into roast beef and Yorkshire pudding while your children go hungry. A nation is a family, and we need to regain the ethos of a family held together by social bonds and mutual obligations and responsibilities. We need a humanist ethos of solidarity and working for the common good. Let me outline just a few of my policies. My government will cap energy prices with a £100 billion loan scheme to energy companies underwritten by the Treasury. This is the simplest and most effective way to help families and businesses across the country. It avoids the inflationary hazard of the government printing money to pay for your energy bills, but it smooths out the current crisis over 10 to 15 years, which gives us time to fix the energy market. This scheme will be combined with tiered pricing so that the first 10 kilowatt hours per day is affordably priced, and anything over that will attract a higher charge. To improve energy security and affordability in the short to medium term, my government will restore gas storage capacity and end the moratorium on fracking. We are committed to phasing out fossil fuels, and we will turbocharge investment into clean energy technologies, including modular nuclear reactors, hydrogen and fusion, as well as offshore wind, bringing solutions to the market as quickly as possible and creating a vibrant export market for British companies. My government is committed to the NHS and will tackle the immediate crisis in ambulance waiting times and A&E by improving the throughput of older patients to social care. We will address the crisis in social care by funding local councils to increase capacity. Longer term, we will create a new financial structure for the NHS to end once and for all its perpetual crisis. We deserve an NHS we can be truly proud of. My Humanist government believes in young people and in the importance of enabling them to buy homes and raise families. Here in Bournemouth, we will incentivise BCP Council to build affordable homes on brownfield sites such as the old cinema complex in Westover Road and the old Methodist Church site opposite the BIC. We will put an end to the practice of demolishing hotels and leaving unsightly plots vacant for years, if not decades. We will aim to restore the beauty and harmony of towns and cities. My Humanist government will also prioritise tackling inflation. This is not going to be easy, but we will invite Henry Ruff to become the new Governor of the Bank of England with a mandate to bring inflation under control. And Henry will be giving a talk here in this very room on inflation in a month's time. My Humanist government will solve the illegal migrant crisis. Immigrants are, of course, welcome to Britain if they wish to come here and contribute to our future success. But we will also play our part in taking in genuine refugees. But we have to tackle illegal migration and people trafficking. My government will adopt the same policy which is used by the European Border Agency to deter illegal immigrants from Africa. We will build airborne surveillance capacity in the English Channel and alert the French police to intercept people traffickers before they leave the French coast. If boats do attempt the crossing, the UK Border Authority will intercept them mid-channel. Traffickers will be arrested and illegal migrants will be transferred to seaworthy vessels, inflatable vessels with enough fuel to get them back to France. This policy will break the business model of the people traffickers. Let's have no more talk of deporting illegal migrants to Rwanda. Finally, my Humanist government will immediately elevate Andrew Copson and Lynn Glass to the House of Lords and abolish the automatic right of 26 bishops to sit in the House of Lords. We will end compulsory collective worship in schools and ensure that humanist parents and children are not discriminated against in the school system. We will authorise humanist celebrants to perform humanist weddings and legislate to bring in assisted dying with all the safeguards outlined by Barry Newman in his talk last year. I urge you to vote for the Humanist Party and for me as your next Prime Minister. Thank you.
Well, there is a bit of a point of order there, which I let Sir David carry on because he is, we all acknowledge, a very eloquent speaker, but I would question whether actually it is a humanist value to intercept boats in breach of the law at sea and probably in breach of the Geneva Convention and return the migrants to the country to which they have they've come from. So I leave that with you to consider, and I think it's now time to give Cathy a chance to respond to Sir David's speech.
There is two questions I want to ask you. What is affordable housing?
Okay, that's a very good question. Affordable.
It's a vital question because we've so many of the policies we've had actually inflated prices. I just would like you to know in Bournemouth, what do you think the affordable price would be for a two-bed maisonette?
An actual price on a two-bed?
They will pay. What do you think it is?
I don't have the figures to hand.
Can I suggest then it might not be a very sound policy?
Thank you for that challenge.
Thank you. We'll leave it there. Aaron.
Yes.
Last but not least, I'm sure Aaron will give us a lot to think about.
Well, I know Dan has used up our quota on the comedy and humour here, so I'll just get straight down to it without any of that stuff. So, this speech could be about me, but it isn't. This speech could be about the election, but it really isn't. This speech is about you, the voter. It's about your vision and your expectation. Because when a great nation such as ours is electing a new leader, it wants someone so inspiring, so wonderful, so absolutely qualified for the job, it is virtually godlike. You raise the bar so high, as we all do, that it's impossible to be met. We therefore settle for someone, not the best, not the most skilled, but someone that shares a similar vision. It's true that we've had a bumpy start to this decade, and if it were just us here in the UK, then I'd be deeply concerned. But it's not just us. All of the world has faced a pandemic and come through the other side, and although it is just us that's left the EU, so far, I do not see that as a challenge, but as an opportunity. One which to step forward into the world, to trade in goods, people, skills, technology and innovation. We will connect with our friends and neighbours, both locally and in the Commonwealth, as together we find solutions to overcome the energy crisis, food shortages, climate targets and immigration problems. Our aim is to grow our scientific, technological and pharmaceutical areas that we excel at. We will further develop green electric vehicles with superior battery capacity and roll out a vast network of charging points, both at home and in convenient places like supermarkets, car parks and workstations. We will expand in agricultural areas with hydroponics, eco-farming, efficient land and water use and combined warehouse growth centres. We will push for lab-grown meat to go from unaffordable science fiction to reality, so that those choosing to eat meat without the sacrifice of animals can do so with filled bellies and clear consciences. And on a global platform, we will further reach out and building new friendships. With our Cantiac Alliance, see the manifesto, the aid delivery ships, see the manifesto, our national yacht and new trade relations from every corner of the planet being drawn up. To the world I invite you and now say, we are open for business. And we will involve you, the great people of this great country, in the goings-on of everyday life. We have our Civil Assist Volunteers programme. We will have far more involvement for young people, both before and outside of schooling. We will involve the community in its local council by reaching out, inviting in, and being better informed in your town and city's events more than ever before. And we will secure a future that every one of us can be proud of. Every one of us. Because if just one of us falls, it affects us all. It is in everybody's interest that the country moves forward as a whole, doing its best for society, doing an honest day's work in a job that we truly feel passionate about, and serving the community in a voluntary capacity as volunteering helps build bonds, connects people and strengthens local relationships. And we will involve those who have ventured outside of law and order, whether through the state failing them, via life's mistakes or just poor judgment. We will help them get back on track and rejoin the rest of the community, adding to its splendour rather than detracting from it. We want crime, punishment and rehabilitation to have an entirely new take that not only addresses the offence committed, but really and truly prevents the next one. We will combine our abilities in Think Tank Britain, where every person will be able to forward ideas and initiatives through to the government. Such fantastic talent exists where people in their own specific fields find great solutions to problems and yet are unable to implement them or get their voices heard by people who can make a difference. And we will demonstrate that a country can work together for the interests of the many without having to be divided, subdivided by unions, class or prejudice. We want to replace old homes, outdated tower blocks, poorly insulated premises and buildings that are no longer fit for purpose. Through demolish, transition and build, we will develop areas of society that are not just not working and make better use of the land we have already scarred and turn it into visually pleasing and environmentally enhanced areas in which to live. We will conquer the failures that exist within our culture and turn them into successes. Our community correction centres will involve a shake-up of the rehabilitation system, a reimagined view of how we utilise schools with the Civil Assist Force. With FitBrit, we will get fitter, active and healthier. And with a rethink of the foreign aid budget, we will explore how Britain can best serve those countries not doing as well as us. A country is not judged by its little people, in the same way as it's not judged by its banks. Yes, some wages are too high, and yes, some people are too poor, and we want to address that. Yes, some places seem privileged, and some areas forgotten, and we will address that too. There are some who simply want to stop rich people being rich, but that isn't the answer. Yes, the wealthy should pay their way, but we don't want to stop their success, because their success feeds money into our national programmes, for which we need to be appreciative and supportive. So no pretense, no fluff, no giving you the words you want to hear. This is me and what's on the table. If you truly like what you see, what you know, what you read and what you hear, then there's a national survey coming up requiring your cross in a box. If your sensibilities fall in the direction of one of these other fine candidates, then go with your heart and select one of them. But I ask you, never lose sight of the big picture. A leader is just filling a role. A leader is a person like you and I, and there is no training that will make them the person you want them to be. But with your backing, your input, and by working together, you and I can all make a leader someone who is real, honest, and bursting with integrity. The leader we all need me to be, and hopefully one you are inspired to follow. Thank you. Excuse me while I mount a bit.
Dan, would you like to ask any question that is relevant to Aaron's speech of him?
Yes. Well, thank you, Aaron, for the commitment in that speech to not adding any fluff to your leadership.
Glad you noticed that part.
Yes. I noticed another part where you said that you would help people who are poor. Somewhere in the middle of the speech, there was a sentence on that. I was wondering what you would do to help people who are poor, and also what you would say to the lady I saw in Wilkinson's the other day, returning sanitary products that she realised she couldn't afford. How would you encourage her to pull herself up by her bootstraps, or better herself in society?
Well, not knowing the woman in question, who we'll call Jessica for the sake of anything, depending on whether she's a working person or an out-of-work person. If she's an out-of-work person, then the Universal Credit £20 uplift remains in my policy, and the ESA will also get the same £20 uplift. So those policies will be uplifted. There will be a mass programme of affordable housing, both purpose-built, studio pods, and all sorts of other things. There's a policy on the back table with that in extreme detail. So housing will be made affordable, and the initial income will be uplifted, as well as a whole host of other policies I'm sure we'll get into later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've now each set your stall out. In very simple terms, the key factors are that Cathy wants to stop any control of money.
Not any.
Not any.
There's lots of control of money. Mr.
Right.
Chairman.
Thank you. She doesn't think the present controls of money are correct. I should clearly not enter into a debate here because I will be outspoken.
Yes, I understand
Yes.
that. I just don't.
Yes, but since Cathy is, well, I think we've started a particular rabbit running here, and I'd like to hear from each of the other candidates what your views are on this idea, and perhaps for the benefit of everybody, if they weren't paying attention right at the start of Cathy's speech, my understanding is what I'd like you to recapitulate what you were saying.
I'm not an economist, as most of you know, but there is modern monetary theory which says, and I think it's right, Stepney, Kelton, Greensmith, I'm trying to think of some more names, my brain's gone, who say that money is no longer with the gold standard. We, as a monetary sovereign nation, can create money. Money is only noughts. It's noughts and noughts and noughts and noughts and noughts. Did you know, if you get a mortgage, you go into the local high street bank now, because so many controls were taken off, they type down, okay, you can have 100,000, they write down those noughts, as you pay it off, they take off those noughts, there isn't any money in those. And so the government can print any money it likes. It mostly sells as a treasury, as government bonds that are mostly bought by the Bank of England, a third of the so bought by the Bank of England, which is us. So we can actually print money. It does exist, and we do print money. That's how we get money. It's not linked to anything else. But we need money to make our society go round. We need money to pay taxes with. we need money for people to exchange. But actually what limits us is inflation. If we put too much money in the economy, it inflates things, and then that won't work. If we put too little, it won't work. And also, if we put too much in, we may actually end up using too many resources, or we'll apply too much in the economy, and once you get full employment, and this is a sad thing, if you get full employment, then you get more and more inflation. So we're only actually balanced by those things rather than just the creation of money.
So, thank you, Kathy.
I'm not an economist, but I've read quite a lot of read Stephanie Kelton's Monetary Modern Theory, Modern Monetary Theory.
I'm a banker and I would love to have the opportunity to speak later.
However, thank you. Please pose a question. We have 3 candidates who will all wish to respond to that, hopefully in layman's terms, because most of us aren't economists, as to whether Kathy's belief that we can print money to get us out of the present crisis, if that is...
I didn't say that, unless we have to be limited by inflation. We print too much, it won't work. We won't have enough resources.
So would you like to state actually what that belief that we can print money will do to help us with the present crisis, or for your government?
To get us out of the problem we're in at the moment, it's a different situation than normal, because most of our inflation hasn't been started by us, our country. It has been started by world fuel prices, and the fact that we try to get our fuel consumption down through policies without actually fossil fuels down, without actually replacing having anything in stock that we needed. So if we try and get rid of fossil fuels and we don't have enough things coming in, we put the horse before the cart. We needed to build up our reserves and then get rid of fossil fuels. We did it the wrong way around for popularity. And because of this, the inflation situation is slightly different than it would be normally. And I would have to take advice from my economic advisors. But also, if we have full employment, the people are going to go for more and more money. If we have very low employment...
Okay, I think we have someone who looks as though he's an economic advisor who's about to respond.
I'm absolutely delighted that Kathy came to our talk on modern monetary theory at Dorset Humanists a few years ago, and she was obviously paying attention and has been studying it since. Kathy, of course, is absolutely right, with greatest respect to Susan, who disagrees, and Susan may get into a debate with us. But Kathy, I think, the reason you're right is because the Bank of England has proved that is exactly what happens with quantitative easing, and Rishi Sunak has proved that's exactly what happens when he created the furlough scheme with hundreds of billions of pounds, which suddenly came from nowhere. And the reason we can do that is because we have a sovereign bank. But where I would disagree with you, Kathy, is that I think it would be the wrong time now to start using monetary financing, because the biggest thing, one of the biggest problems we have now is rampant inflation, and we need to draw back the money supply in the economy. So I don't think modern monetary theory would be the right approach in the current crisis.
But actually, I didn't say we ought to go straight to it. I said it's something we ought to consider working towards and thinking about changing our views to. My policies actually didn't include that. They were actually including quite a lot of land tax, switching some of our taxing system over to the value of land rather than to actual employment and dividends.
Okay.
And also the electricity, at the same, I agreed utterly with what you said. There should be a small amount of a very low price that would have to be subsidised, but everyone else pays the market price. So I don't think I'm asking to print any more money than anyone else will follow.
I think it's time for Dan to make his input on this.
Yes, this might sound tangential, but I play an online game, and I have friends in this online game whose job it is in real life to play that game so that they can sell the items that they earn in the game to other players for real life money, a couple of dollars at a time, because they live in Venezuela, where a month's work is worth about £10 in English money. They cannot live on that, they cannot afford to buy food, and the main reason for this is that the government basically did print as much money as it wanted in order to provide as many public services that people wanted, and it was great for a while because they had lots of oil and people loved it, and industries just fell apart because the government was doing everything, and well, now it's a disaster. People play online games for a living. So I don't want that to happen to us. That can happen to us if we're extremely irresponsible. I don't think that Cathy is suggesting that we're being that level, that we should be that irresponsible. But I'm not yet fully convinced that modern monetary theory is accurate. I'm willing to explore the possibility. I don't have anything against being persuaded that it's true if lots of experts told me that it was real. I love the idea of a magic money tree. But I'm not going to implement policies relying on it until I've been persuaded by good experts that it is actually correct, and I haven't yet been.
Can I just, very
No, I'm so sorry. Aaron needs a chance to come back if he wishes to, and then we have to move on.
Yes, definitely. If you simulate this life to a game of chess, if you put your bishop right out there on a limb, right across the board on its own, with a monetary policy, it's on its own, it's vulnerable, and it will collapse. So what you need to do is get all your places strategically positioned so that everything works together. So the employment needs to be there, the housing needs to be there, everything needs to be affordable, energy needs to be supported, and all of these things together will move society back into the place where it's comfortable and needs to be. Cathy says just printing zeros. Zeros are other people's money. And if it's the UK's other people's money, that's possibly okay. But when it's other people's money outside of the UK, that's when we have a credit rating problem. We can only borrow money on the world markets when our UK's credit rating is at a safe standard. I think it's a double A. I'm just having my part. You've had 25 minutes, thanks. So as we move forward, if we push that bar too up and we ruin our credit rating, we won't get any rating at all, and then we'll be a blacklisted country, and then we will get even worse.
Thank you. On that point, it is time that we, and I appreciate you all wanted to say more, but there is a chance in the tea room in a few minutes' time. There is just one other thing I think we ought to give you all a chance to talk about, remembering that we are humanists, and we haven't really heard much in the way of humanist policies this evening. Specifically, I'd like you all to answer two questions. One is, do you think that the present way in which we have 26 bishops in the House of Lords but no humanists is acceptable, and you wish to change that policy? And then secondly, given that we have a general election in 2 years' time, how will you sell that policy to the general electorate and the members of the Church of England, otherwise known as the Conservative Party of Prayer? Right, so
I mentioned prejudice earlier.
I'm going to ask David to answer that question first. I happen to know he is from an ecclesiastical family, so he probably has an issue.
Yes, well, Chairman, I'm sure you were paying attention to my humanist policies at the end of my speech. I did say that I would abolish the 26 appointed bishops in the House of Lords. The way I would sell this to the electorate and to the Church of England is on the basis of fairness. So I have no problem whatsoever with bishops being in the House of Lords, but they shouldn't be there as a matter of right. So we can have humanists, we can have Christian bishops, we can have rabbis, we can have imams, we can have anything you like in the House of Lords as long as it's done fairly and equitably, and that would be my pitch to the electorate and to the Church of England, and I'm sure that they will agree with me.
Dan?
Well, we have lords whose job it is to represent various business industries, and Christians are a community. There are a lot of Christians in this country. And I don't actually think there's anything wrong with having them represented in the House of Lords, as controversial as that might seem. But I do think that there should also be humanist lords to kind of counterbalance them. And I think that the proportion of these lords should be based on the percentage of society that those religions make up. So about half of people in the UK at the moment are not religious, so maybe we should have about half of the religion or worldview representing lords be non-religious or humanists. if that's not allowable, then I would have to support David's proposal to remove the bishops from the House of Lords.
Thank you. Cathy?
Well, I don't think anyone should be in a second chamber that is there by right. No one has a right. I think humanists say all people are equal and all people should have the same rights. So I don't think there should be any hereditary laws at all. I don't think there should be any group that by right can have a representative who actually changes our laws. I'm not saying I don't respect very many members of the House of Lords, but I think we should change the whole thing, and in doing that we would remove the bishops from there and we just have an elected second chamber. I don't like the idea that when anybody stops being Prime Minister, they can actually appoint their friends into that government, and I think that's the way I'm going to sell it to the voting electorate, by saying I'm for fairness, I'm a humanist. What right has anyone to make laws for us unless they are chosen by a democracy?
Thank you.
We have a really minority
Aaron.
government. Yeah.
Aaron?
What she said, pretty much. You'll see in my manifesto, there's a page on constitutional reform, and basically nobody should be there, as Cathy says, because of their religious background. I will move this, not just in the first Parliament, but in the first year of Parliament, to a secular nation, so that everybody in there is representative of the citizens of the UK, not the citizens of a faith or a belief or a religion. So there are, I think, 37 humanists in there, Dan, just to balance that figure up. But they're not there because of humanists, they're there because of something else, who happen to be humanists. So if one of the members in the audience here was an engineer of some description, and you were put into the Lords, and you happen to be a bishop or a Catholic or anything else, that would be circumstantial. But you would be there because of something more important, not because of a belief.
Thank you. Well, at this midway point, we seem to have an outbreak of agreement. That may give you some difficulty, because we're now going to ask you to vote to reduce the number of candidates from 4 to 3.
Drum roll.
Once you have returned your ballot papers, I will also ask you to leave this room, because we have a 20-minute break. The drinks are already prepared for you in the Commons tea room, and when you come back, please return your written questions, as I've already set out, and return your ballot slips. We will then start proceedings by announcing the result of this ballot. Thank you very much. I now call on the chair of the 1984 committee to announce the results of the first poll.
Okay.
You may sit down, Dan.
Okay, I'm going to read these in alphabetical order as they're printed, and Daniel Dancy has 9 votes. Aaron Darkwood has 5 votes. Cathy Silman has 8 votes, and David Warden has 3 votes. So, David Warden is duly eliminated.
Thank you very much for
Sorry? Yes. Now, David, it is naturally the privilege of the person who is no longer in the competition to recommend to his followers whom they should follow. Would you like to make such a recommendation and say that, and naturally say that you have no ambitions yourself and you're not in the least disappointed?
I'm going to spend time
that you'd like to be Foreign Secretary? Well, I have to say that I was very impressed with Cathy's programme and the fact that she was bringing in thinkers that I'm very interested in, like Kate Rayworth, with Donald, of the energy pricing regime that needs to come in. And we broadly agree on modern monetary theory as well, where there was some controversy from the floor about that particular theory. So I think I would very much like to see Cathy Silman enter 10 Downing Street on the 5th of September.
I'm not so sure I want to.
Well, we now turn to your chance to ask questions. I've had a number of written questions submitted to me, and interestingly, I think all of them have made the cut. They will all be asked. There's one which is I will start with because it is anonymous, and I will ask each of the remaining 3 candidates to respond. Why affordable housing? Instead, why not return to council housing? Cathy?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. I'm not sure how many people know the story of it, but when Margaret Thatcher abolished it, well, it didn't abolish it, but she decided to sell council housing when she first came into the office. The idea was there going to be opportunities for everyone to be able to buy their own. And at the same time as she did that, she actually introduced housing benefit. And the housing benefit actually went, the amount of council houses went down, and the housing benefit actually went to private landlords, so other housing went up. And the other thing that's happened, when there was a lot of council houses, as is not now, the mix of people on the council estates was a mix of anywhere. Now, unfortunately, it's all, I think the other day when I looked, there was something like 9 council properties in the whole of the BCP area that people could bid for. 9. And the only people going to get that if you're really vulnerable, you get that if you're really vulnerable, if you're really ill, or you've got a large family and you've been evicted. So what happens is you then get pockets of deprivation. So I think this is vital that we stop building any other housing for a time. I know it's controversial, and just build council houses. One of my sons suggested is that we actually stop. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, well, I almost completely agree with Cathy.
Okay, thank you. That's enough. Aaron?
Almost completely.
Okay, if you must.
I don't think that we should stop the building of private homes. I do want to have more council homes. I would rather convert existing structures into livable homes in order to reduce the carbon impact of construction.
I was just starting to say.
So we both agree on that, apparently. But I really have nothing against affordable private rented homes. I do think that the right to buy a council house was a mistake. And I also think it's unfair that you have a right to buy a council house that you've been paying rent for, but you don't have a right to buy a private house that you've been paying rent for. There's a kind of imbalance there. And I would rather solve that by getting rid of right to buy. I think it's a mistake to sell off those houses.
Okay, it is true that there's probably only 9 houses to bid for, but there are hundreds out there. The problem with council houses, or people who have bought council houses, is that people don't move. They get a place and they're paying £400 a month for it instead of £900. Why would you move from 400 to 900? So people stay where they are. It's also a ruse that we build council houses. That's not the case. We had World War II. We flattened most of our flattened most of our countries and town centres. So we had a rebuilding programme. We rebuilt, and then we stopped. And that's where we were. It is true we have a shortage of housing, and it is true we have a shortage of council housing, but the housing estate stations have taken over from council housing. So they're still being built, but not at the same rate, but at still affordable prices. But of course, we have, on average, 1,000 people wanting a home in this town right now. And to build council housing, you might build over there and build 12 or 15 council houses, which isn't going to meet the demand. By the time we get there, we're going to have 1,500 people needing them. So with my housing pod plan, you get a stretch of land, you build 8 in a block, 3 stories high, 24 within a month, because they are modularly built in a factory, plopped onto the ground, put bricks around them, everything's intact, it's all fitted out with furniture, and it's ready to go very quickly. We need a rapid housing plan, and my policy plan is at the back of the room if you want to see the detail.
Thank you, Aaron.
Are they private?
I think we should move on. There are a lot of other questions. Indeed, Aaron has actually already answered another of the questions, but I have one here. Bronya, would you like to answer your question?
You asked the question.
No, you don't want to. That's all right. I will ask a question anonymously then. Yes, so I'm asking a question. This may have been written by anyone in this room. But no, first of all, I will ask Frank to read out his question. Frank, there we are. Thank you.
I'm reading this on behalf of Bronya. I just say this is more of not exactly a question in one sense, but it's more like a comment or what you could say. I'm saying here, nobody seems to be addressing the problem of the raw, unbridled capitalism, which is not fit for purpose, in my view. Just as feudalism went away, so capitalism should be hastened to its end.
Thank you. Yes, I think Aaron can defend capitalism.
In my honour of defending capitalism, capitalism has made food cheaper in this country since we've had Tesco, Sainsbury's, Asda and various others all competing at the capitalist level of bringing in mass food at a very cheap price. People like myself can go out and afford to buy stuff. You can buy bread at affordable prices, milk, etc., etc. When all we had was high street shops or corner stores or independent retail units or butchers, as nice and antiquated as that all was, they are unaffordable. And if we had those now, if you lived in Ashley Cross or somewhere else where you've only got these independent stores, it's very expensive. So my defence of capitalism, if that's what we're calling it, is that because big business came in, they buy in bulk and they bring the prices down.
Unbridled.
Thank you very much.
So the money goes up.
Right.
And they give you crap.
Dan, would you like to
Yes.
respond to that?
Well, I'm not a big fan of capitalism, but that doesn't mean I'm a communist either. I don't want to get rid of capitalism. I would be quite happy to look at the possibility of limiting the ratio of pay between the poorest full-time worker in a company and the amount of money that's given in compensation, not just in salary, but also in stocks and shares and other ways that the rich people manage to extract money from companies. So that you can only earn, let's say, 100 times as much as the poorest person, which I know sounds like way more than it should be, but is actually a lot less than the extraordinarily wealthy owners of some massive companies are actually taking out of their companies.
And the charities.
Sometimes also charities.
Thank you.
I'm
Kathy.
agreeing with Dan in lots of ways. I'm not against capitalism, but capitalism doesn't work as trickle down as it used to, where people, if you made money, I've got a really good friend down here, they ran a small business in Birmingham. They ran it very ethically. They nearly went bankrupt. They lived on beans and toast for a year to keep their workers on, and they got going again. And they paid their workers well. They made money, their workers make money, and they trained their workers and paid for education with some of them. That's brilliant capitalism. The capitalism that I don't like is a capitalism where the money is siphoned off into financial institutions, to service and into housing, very, very much into housing at the moment, and there's none left to trickle down for other people. So I'm not against capitalism itself, it's just how it's used.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's move on to another topic. We have an anonymous question, which is, as far as I'm aware, the UK has the lowest productivity rate in Europe. How do you propose to get the lazy workforce to work? Now, Dan, I think you're a good motivator.
Well, I don't think it's entirely down to laziness. I think if you don't have a job at the moment, I've had a position of not having a job. If you find a job that may be entry level, all the money that you were being paid in universal credit will immediately be taken off of you, and it kind of feels like you're earning a third less than you actually are. I think that a lot of our current policies keep poor people poor, keep them depressed. If you're living in poverty, you're very likely to be suffering from depression, and that's just not a good way of being productive and going out there and getting one of those good jobs that would help make you a productive member of society.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron?
Right. Well, we need hopefully a whole load of things to be happening in this country to build, but we're not a builder. We currently don't have the capacity to compete with things built in China or Japan or India, Indonesia, all of those other countries who can build a car for a third of the price that we can. So what we need to do is excel in the innovation that we have with our science and technology areas. So we invent new technologies. We modernise our wind and wave technologies. The wave thing that we're working on in Scotland with wave generated power is revolutionary. We're currently at the very forefront of that on the global stage. If we can manufacture that, make it affordable and then sell that abroad, that will be one of our many assets that we can use to our benefit, as well as lab-grown meat and vertical stack of how to build grow food in hydroponic areas. So rather than having acres and acres of farmland, you have a derelict warehouse that you convert. You have everything grown in water.
I think it's a point of order. I know all politicians are good at not answering the question.
Yes, I was going to object.
Yes, but I think it's time to give Kathy a chance not to answer the question.
Firstly, I question why we have to increase productivity. I think it's more important to increase education and health before we do that. I also question this thing about lazy workers. It's almost a passion of mine that people say, oh, they just work in Tesco's, or they just drive a bus, or they just, I don't know, a cleaner. We need all those people, and no work should be seen as demeaning or less worth than the others. You need the cleaner in the hospital just as much as you need the surgeon. Yeah. Because otherwise people are going to die, and perhaps even way more. So I think we ought to value all work, and the more we value it, it's more likely that people will actually come off universal credit because they want to go to work. So there's I think I've answered two parts of that question. I hope to.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we have run out of time. Thank you those who asked questions which I didn't have a chance to answer. There may yet be time if we catch up later, but it is now 9:10 and we have 2 ballots to do. So will the 1922 committee please distribute the ballot papers?
1984 committee.
As well.
And 86, why not?
Yes. And though in the meantime, the 3 remaining candidates will wish to consider what they will say when they were down to 2 and they want to persuade you to vote for them.
Well, you could ask one of those questions whilst we're waiting for this to happen.
I think that is an excellent idea, yes, yes.
Simon, would it be possible to hear again the votes that were there in the first round so that we can think
I'm sorry, that is up to the 1984 committee. I'm a mere functionary here.
Would the 1984 people remember what votes there were at the moment? Yes.
Would that not sway your vote?
Well, it might sway my vote, that's the point. But it was only orally rather than put in the paper, and I didn't at the time.
Are we voting or not?
Sorry?
Let's not.
Well, let's not vote.
Yeah.
Makes no difference.
Daniel Dancy has 3 votes this time. Aaron Darkwood has 6 votes, and Kathy Silman has 11. That means this round,
well done.
Daniel is eliminated.
Daniel, would you like to recommend to your supporters who they should vote for?
Well, I will be voting for Kathy. I don't, for the sole reason that I think there's a more than 50% likelihood that Aaron would launch us into a nuclear war in his first week of office.
Yes. Very good. Right. Well, we're moving straight on now to closing arguments by. Now, I'm going to ask you.
Closer together.
Sorry. I'm going to.
Policy-wise, or
I'm going to. I'm going to ask Kathy, as the lady, to select one card. I have here a queen and a king. If she selects the queen, she can go first.
Thank you.
Aha.
Oh,
I'm a queen.
well, I think in this Alice in Wonderland world, that means that Aaron will go first.
How long do I have? Is this like a 2-minute thing?
How long?
How long have we got?
2 minutes, I'm tired.
You can have 4. You can stretch it to 3.
3 minutes.
But I know we want productivity, so quickly.
Quickly, okay, right, okay. In my parliament, there will be a whole load of changes, and as I referred to the chessboard moving forward, there are multiple strides that we have to go forward simultaneously in order to strike a balance of building the whole UK up. We've got areas that we're going to do inside the UK with our farming, our agriculture, our housing pods and various other things, and things abroad like the aid delivery ships and foreign policy implements that will go over there and help spread the UK's wealth over to other countries whilst helping them rebuild us at the same time. So it's a multifaceted area. Hopefully you've all read my 36-page policy over there, and you've absorbed that there's a lot of depth and thought, and not only can you come up with good ideas, but you've got to be able to finance them. They have to be funded, and that's where the trick comes in. I wanted to increase the defence budget by 3%, but to find another 43 billion in my plan, I couldn't do it. So as much as I wanted to do that, I had to find areas that were feasible, practical and affordable, whilst maintaining those people that invest in the UK still continue to do so, rather than us boosting the funds without us breaking the bank. Because we can't damage our credit rating, because when we ask them for some more money, they will say no, and then we won't get any more loans. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is just on my clock, I should go again.
I'm just starting the clock for Kathy now.
Well, I would like to be Prime Minister, in theory, if I was younger with more energy, because I think policies matter. Personalities, I can get someone charming in my government, or someone very good at IT, if you'd like to join. I can get a good speaker. But what I want to do is get people thinking in a different way. We've thought this way ever since probably Thatcherism, and we've got to change the way we're thinking. I mean, I haven't actually said anything about defence or immigration, and in fairness to Daniel and David, I think I ought to. When I was a child, the map was pink, and everybody saw Britain as a wonderful power who was going to, lots of people saw Britain as a wonderful power that was going to influence the world and help the world and be the saviour of the world. But also, people now, and people then, see Britain as a country that took things from the world and built their wealth on it. And I would like us to question whether we want to be seen as a person who is going to lead the world into a new way of thinking about life as a fairness for all, or whether to go around banging a gong and saying we are powerful and look at us, we are wonderful. I don't think we need a ship to sail anywhere. I think we need to be re-seen as a country that is for fairness and puts a lot of money into helping countries that are in conflict, and the main thing as well is climate change. Look at the Horn of Africa at the moment. There are no such things as illegal immigrants or asylum seekers. The people in the Horn of Africa are starving. If you were starving, wouldn't you get on a boat and come over to England? Wouldn't you try? I think I rest my case really on being a Prime Minister for a country that is based on humanist principles of fairness for the whole world, and not to be seen any longer as rule Britannia. And also, I would not fire a nuclear bomb.
Thank you very much. It now falls to the 1984 committee to count the votes.
So then the final votes are Aaron Darkwood has 7 and Kathy Silman has 14. Kathy.
I therefore... Now, Kathy, your chauffeur-driven limo is now waiting outside to drive to the palace.
I'm being driven to the big brother house.
I'll hand back to David. We can come out of alternate reality.
Can I just say one thing? I would have voted for Dan because I think he'd make a brilliant Prime Minister.
No, I think applause is required for all the candidates for putting up a sterling job this evening. And really well done.